of the civil rights movement. Now, you might not know also that that same year, there was a park here in Baltimore, Gwen Oak Amusement Park in West Baltimore. And this amusement park was segregated. And the picture that you see on the screen is of the first little black girl who had the opportunity to ride the merry-go-round in that park. And so as Dr. King is giving his speech around his dream and what he envisions for the future, this is exactly what he envisions, because he's questioning why is it that his kids can't play on the same playground or ride the same merry-go-round as all of the other kids. And the entire civil rights movement was centered around equality. And Dr. King took his cue from one main place and then one secondary place. The main one was the scriptures. Dr. King, being a follower of Jesus, couldn't understand how it is that we cannot be united if we're all God's children, if we're all God's creation. And as he looked at Jesus and as he studied the New Testament, he was following in Jesus' steps and echoing the words of the scripture. Secondarily, he began to echo the words of the Constitution that talked about equality and talked about rights for all, but clearly that wasn't the case. And then Dr. King took his cue from the scriptures again when he said, our plan is going to be non-violence. I want you to put a pin right there, and I want to go to my second kind of random thought. The other random thought I had was around design. And some of you who know me or know a little bit about me know that I love design. All things design, specifically interior design. I just love everything about it. But here's what I want you to know about design. Design should provide clarity, or good design should provide clarity. Now, when we think about design, like we see it and we experience it in many different ways. When we go in a grocery store, the grocery store is designed a specific way to help you navigate through the aisles and get what you need to get. The roadways are designed a specific way. Technology is designed a specific way. Rooms are designed a specific way to provide clarity. Now, design also invokes and influences our mood through color, shape, texture, and all of those sorts of things. But the main reason that designers are hired usually is to address a problem. Hey, I want this space to be bigger. I want it to feel nicer. Hey, I want to add a bathroom, or I want to do this, or provide some sort of clarity. And the designer is taking its cue from that direction and some sort of design inspiration. Here is where both Dr. King and this whole idea that I just presented to us and this thought about designers collide. Dr. King ran into something that designers constantly are dealing with. And it's just simply this: getting people to follow. Getting people on board with the plan. Now, maybe you're not a community organizer or activist like Dr. King. Hey, maybe you're not a designer, but you might be a parent. You might be a doctor. You might be a teacher. You might even be a friend. And in whatever category we're in, we know that it's just hard to get people on board. It's hard to get them to follow the plan. And it's usually because of one main reason: vision. It's the inability to see or the unwillingness to see. And here's the thing: when we think about Dr. King, like many people didn't want to follow Dr. King's plan or his strategy because it involved humility. And Dr. King said, hey, we're going to take this nonviolent approach, And this is how we're going to do it. And some people weren't with that because they're like, hey, man, that approach is too soft. We need to approach this with violence. We need to approach this with force. And so they pushed back against that. They didn't want to be humble. They didn't want to take that approach. And then there was some who said, hey, it ain't about humility for us. It's about supremacy. We actually like this setup because we have power. Like, we can control things the way that we want to control them. And so, no, we just want to keep this kind of separation that we have. And then there was a third group that was a really big group, probably the largest group, that it wasn't about humility, it wasn't about supremacy, it was about apathy. Hey, I don't know if I want to get involved. Like, hey, I'm going to just stay over here. Hey, if they want me to go here, I'm going to go here. Or, hey, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want that drama. I don't want that smoke. And so you had people who are in one of three of those categories. And then many people push back against designers because they lack clarity on, like, the plan doesn't make sense. Or they don't understand it in their terms. Or the outcome doesn't match what they had in mind. Typically, just as a side note, like, people call designers because they got a problem. They want the problem to be solved. And when the designer tries to give them the plan to solve the problem, then they're like, I don't like that. But why you call me? That's just a separate note. There's also times when I hear the plan and I understand and it does make sense, but it's just too uncomfortable for me. So let me deviate, let me add, let me subtract, or let me just disengage altogether because it's just a little bit too much. And herein lies the problem, I think, in the church. And when it comes to being a Christian or following Jesus, is I think we lack clarity. And I think there's confusion, and I think that there are convoluted ideas that we have. It's part Jesus, it's part self-help, it's part capitalism, it's part TikTok, it's part whatever we want to throw in the mix. And you know what it begins to look like? It starts to look like some of these people on Instagram who are like trying to show you recipes, and it's just a bunch of stuff thrown together, and they calling it good, and you're like, now, that don't look good to me, or I don't know that that's good. And they try to make it convenient, try to make it look good, and then they taste it like, this is so good. And you just know it just look a mess. I think we find ourselves in a similar situation where there are some who say that they follow Jesus or they are of the church or they are Christian, and they just got a bunch of stuff they done thrown together and they calling it good. But here's what I want to submit to you today, HOPEVILLE. This is not a place, and we are not a church of thrown together stuff. And we want to be clear about where we're taking our direction from and where we're taking our cue from. And that's what this series is all about. And so we're taking our starting point from Mark chapter 10. It's actually one of my favorite chapters in the gospel because there's a lot of confusion happening here. There's a lot of lack of clarity in Mark chapter 10. Bunch of questions about a bunch of different things. It first kicks off about divorce. Like, these people are asking Jesus about divorce and, like, is it right to be divorced? And then there's a question about children, and the disciples are trying to hold the children back from coming to Jesus. And then there's a question about eternal life, and there's a question about material possessions. And then the disciples are worried about, like, who gonna have the best seat in Jesus' kingdom? Like, yo, Jesus, when we get there, bro, like, where my seat gonna be? Now, it's nothing wrong with the questions per se, and even the confusion in Mark chapter number 10. But what is a bit of an issue were the motivations in their hearts and the assumptions that were made. And many times we are misaligned in terms of what it means to be the church, to follow Jesus, because our motivations and our expectations are different than what Jesus has for us. And we see an example of this in Mark chapter 10 when we zoom in to this story about a man they called the rich young ruler. Let's zoom in, starting on verse number 17. Here we go. As he was setting out on a journey, this would be Jesus, a man ran up, knelt down before him, and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus responded, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and mother." He said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all of these from my youth," which really would have meant like 13 years old in the Jewish context. So from 13. Looking at him, Jesus loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." But he was dismayed by this demand, and he went away grieving. Some translations say sad, because he had many possessions. If you're taking notes, the title of this message this weekend is The One Thing. When we're kicking off this Clarity series, I think this is the appropriate place for us to start. The one thing. I think this story accurately and succinctly captures this idea of lack of clarity when it comes to what it means to be the church or to be a Christian or to follow Jesus. Because Jesus clearly, throughout the New Testament, throughout the Gospels, he clearly has different ideas and different ways of getting things done. His movement, as a matter of fact, the people who followed him were called people of the way. That's what Jesus was known as. He even said, "I am the way." And so the people who followed him were known as the people of the way. When you go to the HOPEVILLE website and you click on the About tab, you will see where it says our dream, our flow, our culture. And the first thing that you see under our flow is following Jesus. That simply means we are taking our cue from Jesus. That is the one thing. That is the paramount thing. We're not making up stuff. We're not trying to remix stuff. No, we are following Jesus and following what he did in the scriptures. That's why it's there. So here we go. I got 2 points for us, and I'm gonna get out your way. 2 reasons why I believe the rich young ruler went away sad. And I also believe that these 2 reasons are the reasons why we are often misaligned when it comes to following Jesus and being the church. And I think it's because our focus is on a lot of things, but not the one thing. So here's the first reason. I think that we're more focused at times on doing the right things versus being in right relationship. Let me break it down. The rich young ruler's justification to Jesus was all about being right. He had his checklist of the things that he had done right. And his goal was to make sure that he had done the right things so that he can get eternal life. He wasn't wrong about that. Yes, it's good for us to want to do the right things and to follow the law. It wasn't wrong. It's just that Jesus' metric and his motivation was just different. See, the context for this young man who had a lot of influence, he had a lot of success, he had made a lot of money. So the metric for him was the Old Testament law and the covenant, which meant that he was to keep all of the laws and this whole idea of ceremonial cleanliness. So he needed to present himself a certain way, and he needed to live a certain way in order to maintain his cleanliness or to be right. So Jesus knew that when the young man is asking him a question, he knew that he meant well. He just knew that he was misguided. And sometimes we are too. We think that just doing the right thing is the goal. Like we have a checklist in our minds of, hey, if I pray, if I read the scriptures, if I come to church, if I do it. No, yes, we should do those things, but it's not just about checking those things off of a list. We often think that if we do those things, that's how we're going to get God's blessing, God's favor over our lives. And in our minds, we're thinking material success. We're wanting God to bless us so we can get these material things, so we can get these promotions and live a certain way and all of that. That's really what we have in our mind. But here's what I love. I love the compassion that Jesus had. Look at what it says. When this man is presenting his argument to Jesus about how he's checked the list off of all the things he's done well and right, and Jesus knows that's not the point. Look at how he responds to him. Jesus didn't rebuke him. It says, looking at him, Jesus loved him and said, sir, you're missing one thing. Go sell your stuff and follow me. Here's the translation. This isn't about you and your checklist. This isn't about you justifying yourself and making sure that you're good. Actually, I want you to do right by others, and I want you to be in right relationship with me. That's the whole point. Jesus wants us to do right by others and be in right relationship with him. That means that we're not prioritizing our own priorities. We're prioritizing others. This isn't about the rules, Jesus is saying. It's about relationship. And everything flows from that. Motives, mentions, how we move. So what does that mean for us, HOPEVILLE? This is what it means. I've told this story once, I think in a smaller setting here. I don't know that I've told it from this stage or this platform. But I remember when we were getting ready to plant. And the way that the process works with the Orchard Group, which is the church planting organization that we're a part of, is they find churches to invest in new church plants like us, and they give money. And part of the process is you have a conversation with the leaders of these churches, and they just want to get to know you and want to hear more about vision and, you know, like what you want to see happen in the city and all those sorts of things. And so I was having some of these meetings, and there was a church that we met with, my wife and I, Erica, and I kind of laid out what I hoped for. And one of the things that I said is that I hope that we would have a reputation in this city of love, and that the city leaders and that the community and that people associated with the church would say, hey, I don't know about this Jesus thing. I don't know about this church thing, but I just know these people in this community that they are real people and that they love people and that they love to invest. And so maybe they can help solve our problem. Maybe they can help us with this issue that we're having. And my whole idea was I would love for us to be a part of helping to redeem the reputation of the church. And you know what was told to me? Well, that's a noble cause. That sounds good. But here at our church, we're about baptisms and salvations. That's what we want to see. I said, well, sir, I appreciate that, but hey, if you have no credibility, who's going to get baptized? Who's going to come to Jesus if they can't see Jesus? How are they going to understand who and what Jesus is about if they don't see people following him, if they don't see people loving like him? What does it matter? And we can't do that as a church if we're not in right relationship with him, and all we're trying to do is just the right thing and check lists, check boxes. The second thing that I see here with the rich young ruler is something I see in myself and I see in others all the time. It's this wanting to maintain what is comfortable versus sacrificing for our calling. What the rich young ruler knew was how to keep the law. And what I mean by that, like that was comfortable for him. So he knew the rituals. He knew what to do when he went to the temple. He knew all of the sacrifices, all of the celebrations, all of the festivals. He knew all of that stuff. But what he didn't know was a life of sacrifice following Jesus. That's what he didn't know. He didn't know how to sacrifice according to how Jesus called us to sacrifice. He only understood it in the terms of, hey, if I just kind of do my thing over here and I check these boxes, then I'm good. But he likely didn't understand the very first beatitude, which is in Matthew chapter number 5. This is when Jesus is starting his public ministry, and in his first sermon, the very first beatitude, he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven." That is a reference to humility. And that means that we are called sacrificially to a not so comfortable place in following Jesus. And it's because humility prioritizes others. And this is part of what Dr. King was talking about when he said we should be nonviolent. He said, hey, we don't need to worry about protecting ourselves. We just need to go about this a particular way. Well, people weren't feeling that because that's a sacrificial calling that is not comfortable. And who wants to get up every single day and do that? It's hard. Now, we're empowered by God's Spirit to do it, but this is what Jesus is calling us to. I love what Jerry Bridges says in his book, The Blessing of Humility. He says, people who are poor in spirit see themselves as utterly dependent on God and his grace in their entire lives. Listen, when Jesus asks us to follow him, he's calling us to leave what is comfortable for us, but not on our own and not in our own strength. We're empowered to do that. And he's also saying, this is how you're actually going to see the kingdom of heaven. This is how, and it's already yours. You already have access to it. The point of the church and following Jesus is not some neatly organized, scripted life that is us walking through life like completely shielded from everything and like everything is going to be all good. And maybe we'll experience some drama, but like maybe just a little bit, No, that's not what it is. It's us humbling ourselves and stepping out of what is comfortable, because this is what God has called us to through Jesus. And it's challenging for us because we live in a world that's constantly promoting comfort. And listen, every commercial, everything on IG, like, hey, you can do this quicker. Hey, this will take you 5 minutes versus 50 minutes. Hey, if you just do, everything that's promoted to us is about comfort. And listen, I hear what you're saying. I'm not saying you should never, you like, it's not good to be comfortable sometimes. I mean, we do want to sleep well at night. I get that. But here's the thing we don't understand. This pursuit of comfort and trying to make everything comfortable for us, it lulls us to sleep and distracts us from our calling. Because to love our neighbor like ourselves, to pray for our enemies, that ain't comfortable. So what does this mean for Hopeville? Here's what it means. Last week, I heard this story that really just moved me. And it was about a young man who is a football player at Eastern Michigan University. And this young man is coming into his senior season, and he's been working so hard. And he doesn't have a scholarship. And he's what they call a walk-on player. So that means that, like, you're on the team, but, like, you don't have a scholarship. But he's, like, really close to getting a scholarship. And every year the coaches award, scholarships to certain walk-on players who have worked hard. And this particular year, the coaching staff wanted to give this young man a scholarship. They just didn't have the room to do it. The NCAA, which is the governing body of athletics in college, like they have allotted a certain amount of scholarships, and you can't go over that amount. And so the Eastern Michigan coaches said, we just don't have it to give. But here's what was happening. This young man, because he wanted to play football so bad, and because he loved his teammates, and because he felt called to it, he went to work. And his teammates would see him like going to school, going to practice, and going to work, like constantly. Like he's doing landscaping jobs, and he's got a pickup truck, and he's hauling stuff. He even donated plasma. I don't even know what that is and how you do that. And here's what happened. One of his teammates knew that he was going through this and this is what he was doing. And he said, you know what? He deserved a scholarship. So I went into the coach's office and I said, I'm giving my scholarship to him. And I already talked to my parents, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to figure out how to get my tuition covered. But this man deserves a scholarship, and he reflects the identity of our team. That wasn't comfortable, but he felt called to do that. And when I think about Hopeville, that's what I think about for us. That, man, we might be tired, we might be frustrated, we might be hangry, but we showing up, we're investing, we're doing what God called us to do, not because it's comfortable, but because we're on mission with Jesus. Let me see how I can land this plane for you this weekend. One more story. Leading up to May, like at the end of April, I was thinking about my birthday. And my birthday is in early May. And I'm just a very forward thinker, and I'm always thinking in futuristic terms. And so I started thinking, like, man, the next 10 years, the next decade, what do I want for my life? And it's interesting, like, the thing that came to my mind and that was in my heart was paying off my house. And, we just been in this house for 4 years. We moved to Baltimore 4 years ago. And so, like, I'm not sure how I would do that in 10 years. And I'm not even sure that I can actually pull it off. But I started thinking a lot about it. And just side note, my motivation for doing it is because I really love to give. And so I just thought to myself, like, man, if I eliminate my biggest expense, like, how much could I give? Like, how much more could I invest? Like, that was really, really my motivation. Partly because my love language is acts of service. And so I love to serve. And sometimes I do a little too much, and I'm overexerting because I just love to serve. I just love to give. And so this is what I was thinking. So I started doing a little math. I ain't get discouraged. I looked at the number like, whoo, that's a big number. But I ain't get discouraged. I started doing the math, and started trying to figure it out. And, I was doing some research. And y'all know what happened next. I started doing some research, and Google and Meta and all them people, they nosy. They be listening to you. You know what I'm saying? They listening to, what I'm typing in, and so I start getting these ads, you can be rich in 30 days, they're like, you come to this seminar, and I'm like, what is all, like, so I clicked on one of them and, did a little bit, even went to one seminar, and just real quick, this is what I found out, a pattern emerged. Here's the pattern. The pattern was, okay, you get something for free, which is like a webinar Zoom, they tell you all these compelling stories about, oh, this was great, like, in just 6 months, like, I did this, and then they promise you, like, hey, we got this system. Nobody else got this system, you know what I'm saying? Just us. You're going to spend the next 3 years, like, working to get this. We got it down for you. You can get it in 30 days, right? Then they say, hey, we got this quick, digestible, investment for you, just this amount of money, and it's a little leap for some of us, but then it's not too much of a leap, but then it's like 25 add-ons that they don't tell you about. after you make the initial investment. And then if you're smart like me, you start doing a little, let me find some reviews. And then you go through the reviews and, man, like 98% negative. Like it was a scam, it was this, and like I invested this, and just all of this. And you know what I realized? I realized that God has put big things on our hearts, big things for us to do. We feel compelled, we feel stirred by, and then we try to take shortcuts. And we're trying to literally get something for nothing. And we're trying to experience God's kingdom with minimal activity and minimal investment. The rich young ruler walked away sad because he wasn't clear about what it actually costs. Or maybe he realized what it costs, and he's like, man, is there another way to do this? Like, can I just keep one of my cars, Like, because I don't know about this walking thing. I mean, they didn't have cars back then, but. He thought it was all about doing things for God, but it was about being with God. And that is what Jesus desires of us, is to be with him, because in being with him, the outflow of what we do is connected to what we're influenced by and what has our attention, or who has our attention. Hopeville, all I'm trying to say is we got to be on mission with Jesus. That is the pinnacle and the number one point of like who we are and what we aspire to do, is because we're following Jesus. And he told the rich young ruler, hey, you're going to have more than what you can ever imagine if you just follow me. And here's the thing. Please don't think I'm saying you don't need to have nice stuff and you need to give away all your nice. I'm not saying you need to go home and give away all your Jordans or whatever it is, your purses or whatever it is that you. I'm not saying that. Please don't say that Pastor Joshua told me that. I'm not telling you that. But here's the thing. Jesus is not saying you got to give away your nice stuff. He just don't want your nice stuff to have you. He don't want you prioritizing your life around your nice stuff, because he has more for us in store. So individually, that means that we make a decision to follow Jesus. Collectively, as a faith community here in Baltimore, that means that we're a sacrificial community. And as a baby church plant, it means that we're going to be on mission with Jesus and with each other. And we're going to be committed to that.